Hi, this is Ali from Wixel, the startup, the accelerator for emerging tech services companies. And today I wanted to have a chat with Sajid Akhtar, who is the one of our portfolio companies, the founder of Ascend Analytics. And we want to talk about just the journey in founding a company and growing the services company. So, welcome, Sajid. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Thank you, Ali. Thank you for having me. I started Ascend about 4.5 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic. At that point in time, I was working for Uber, heading analytics for Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan. And then, as we all know, with COVID, mobility came to an absolute halt, and I was looking at options of what I could do. That's how I started the journey at Ascend. With Ascend, we do analytics as a service. All things related to data analytics, be it data warehousing, infrastructure requirements, migration from one data stack to another, building analytics capabilities, machine learning and data science applications, and the whole 9 yards associated with it. That's largely what we have done over the past 4.5 years as well.
Wow, thank you. And I think that was an interesting point you made, right? You were about mobility came down, and then when you were looking at the next steps in your life, the first thought that you actually had, I want to be the master of my own destiny in a kind of way.
Yeah, I don't think it transpired entirely like that. It was more of a situation where, most of the friends that I worked with, most of my team across the region, it got cut down. And I knew for a fact that, analytics at any organization is a nice to have. It is typically not an existential threat. So most likely my department is going to make a further cut and I will lose my job. Whether that happens in the next month, 2 months from now, 3 months from now. I mean, this was a time where we had zero clarity on what the new normal would be, even like, whether people would ever want to sit again with a stranger in a car without making sure, like, have all the safety protocols been met, like, or, is the contagion still out there to get them? And at that point, one thing I started realizing was that it's not just mobility, it's across the sectors. Businesses that have never really thought about digital transformation, have relied very heavily on retail, they'll have to figure stuff out for their existence as well and their survival as well. And then it kind of went from having the consultancy experience. So prior to doing the job at Uber, I was heading analytics for Emerging Markets Property Group. It's the parent company of Bayud, Zameen, and now labeled as Debizzle. um, with that role, I was also doing consultancy on the side. So I had some contacts in that market where, like, I could render services and at least not be entirely out of employment, even if I made a job cut. From there on, it was a matter of just thinking, okay, I've done this before. I do see there should be a lot more demand for it now that there's this dearth of resources who can actually help you with that sort of digital transformation and who have an idea about the market as well. So I kind of ventured out, and before even deciding I'm going to be a master of my journey or not, it was more like, let's do an A/B test on this. I know that there are a lot of people who are looking for services. There are a lot of people who are pretty scared about what would come in 3 to 6 months from now. So I put up a status on LinkedIn. I said, look, this is a very difficult time. All of us are either worried about our jobs and our businesses, and I'm happy to give you a free consultation session on what your strategy should be in this time, especially to build your digital footprint. If you don't have any footprint on the digital side, how to use and data to your advantage. I got 14 appointments out of that. I still don't know how. It just blew out of proportion. I got, like, a lot of requests, and then out of those 14, I realized four of them were willing to pay me money for it. Two of them were okay with the concept of not having me full time and then maybe doing like part time hours. So even before incorporating the company, it was like two contracts which wanted me to be their consultant and doing like 10, 15 hours a week. And then that was the vote of confidence. And then I was like, okay, so if this amount of effort can yield to paying contracts, what if I were to do this full time? Maybe that would go really well. And then that's where I built out a business plan, reached out to a few folks in my network, was able to get some initial investment just to protect that site. I don't know how this would transpire, like, but like, people who have that kind of experience and who can back this up, that would allow me to extend the runway in case things don't work out. That's how it started. It's a little
That's really
different
good.
from.
That's really, really interesting. And so this was just a post on LinkedIn that you made, and you got 14 connections out of that.
Yes, 14 materialized connections who had, who wanted to meet. So 14 appointments essentially.
14 appointments, right?
Yeah.
So a lot more than 14 connections. And like curious, like what was the starting point over there? Did you didn't have like 100,000 followers or something like that, right? Like your LinkedIn profile was the ordinary profile of a professional working in the tech industry, right?
Yes, and I think, some of these things you don't have complete control over as well. If I am to look back at it, I would say that whatever I'd done prior to that point in time, it somehow all added up. And then, a couple of folks who had a lot of reach, they commented on it, they interacted with it, they kind of appreciated, reshared in their network. And then it was just a multiplier effect. Honestly, I did not expect anything like that to happen. I think I had about 3,000 or 3,200 followers at that point in time. And those were also because I used to regularly post about opportunities in the data analytics space. I'd hired, good 25, 30 resources at EMPG as well. At Uber too, the transition was pretty well. And then, on the consulting side too, I had these connects with people who regularly posted about the startup space in that region, right? So it just picked on that traction. And people in the extended network, like, they reached out. I think there was also some degree of validation, at least from a substance perspective. When somebody looked at my profile, they could see that, oh, he's worked at a local unicorn, he's working with a global unicorn right now, so he might know a thing or two about analytics. Like, I think that also had to do with it. But I wouldn't take credit for, being very vigilant and positioning it in the right way. I didn't even know what positioning was until I joined Wixel. So yeah, don't quote me on that though. All right. Yeah. So this
Right,
this
we
is
got
one.
it.
This
Uh,
is the,
I think
this.
this is the one part we can't edit out. That everything you know about positioning is from Excel. Sorry, the editor just doesn't know how to take out that part.
Yeah, sure. That's okay. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
That's
So
really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting, right? And what I think what's amazing about that is you did some pre-validation and you put yourself out there. And so Wixel is 2 years old, but for more than a decade, I've had people asking me uh, what is how did they get into entrepreneurship? Well, okay, maybe not more than a decade, but close to a decade. But we have. And the one step that you took that most people don't take is put yourself out there. And what you're saying is that, hey, you had put yourself out there in the past and developed a little bit of a baseline, but it wasn't something that was out of the ordinary. It wasn't something that is actually out of reach for most of the people that would be considering about starting. But they could actually just put the act of putting yourself out there was really impactful in terms of proved to you that, hey, there is a market out there and I can do this.
100%. I don't think I had planned this out at all. Or I did have this idea that, at some point it would be a good idea to do this for multiple organizations, because the rule of the thumb, this was about 7, 8 years ago, was that, you could get paid at least 1.5 to 2 times your salary on consulting hours. Like, that was the rule of thumb for any consulting gig that we used to do in the side locally. Not talking about exports to US or anything else. That sounded like a pretty good equation when I started doing this on the side. And I was like, I'm just putting in 10 hours here and I'm getting like, half my salary by
Mhm.
doing quarter of the work. That's a pretty good equation. And then if I'm to do this for multiple organizations, one, it genuinely excited me. That's one of those things which when I speak to my friends who are really good at what they do and they try to ask me, oh, is there anything that you can share with us to take this leap of faith? I'm like, if you genuinely enjoy what you do, you already have a direction on what needs to be done, right? Like, you enjoy solving problems, you enjoy doing it at scale for multiple organizations across different industries. And then the rest of it is just like, putting pieces together in the direction that spans in front of you. So I think I had done the first part just because I enjoyed it. And then also like, wanted to earn some extra bucks on the side. And then at the point where I actually decided, okay, I'm going to do this full time, before that I had one enough substance to I didn't really have much of a choice, and I'm being really honest about it. Like, the job that I had was going to go away. And then like, once I started consulting, a month into it, I actually received the notification as well. So it wasn't like this was something that I had kept on the side for a while and experimented for a long time. It was just like, okay, I already knew this was going to happen. Now that it has happened, I have two things in the pipeline. I was a little bit proactive about that. Let's see how I can structure this a little better and then, take it from there on. So I think the advice I would have for somebody who's on the edge, as I would say, is that it's very easy in this day and age to A/B test and see if what you're thinking about has a market or not. For me, it just boiled down to that one status, and then I was able to talk to multiple people and then assess whether the skill set that I personally have is something that can sell as a service, right? And then the service proposition and everything else just followed. So if you have something like that, or even just an idea, it's very easy to A/B test that now. We just don't take that step because sometimes we get scared of the lack of response that we'll get. But I think that's the only way to go.
That lack of response is actually the bigger fear that is there. It's not the not being able to feed yourself, but it's the fear of the lack of response that really does hold people back. So thank you so much for bringing attention to. Actually, you mentioned that you were local, and we actually never gave context of that part of your background to any listener. So, Sajid, you studied in Waterloo. After that, you grew up in Pakistan, studied in Waterloo. After that, you went back to Pakistan, and after working in Canada for a bit. For those that don't know, Waterloo is probably the most respected tech college in Canada, and then from there, uh, you've been working. You started working at the companies you mentioned in Uber in Pakistan, and you left your and when after you founded Ascend Analytics, you came back to Canada to grow your business, and so uh, this is that is a bit of the uh, you saw early success in Pakistan, and next you decided to move to Canada. Tell us a bit more about that move.
Yeah, for sure. I can give you context on both sides of the move. One, when I was studying here in Canada, finished school, had some co-op experience as well. Co-op is the cooperative experience part where for every couple of study terms that you complete, you also complement that with a work term. So I was very lucky I was in a co-op program because I was able to figure out what do I not want to do when I graduate. Like, I know I don't want to work in insurance because it's very boring. I know I don't want to work in investments because it doesn't resonate with the sort of ideology I have. I don't like, my aspiration should not be to make more money than the guy sitting right next to me. I don't resonate with that. Like, some people do. I personally don't. So I figured out what is it that I would really genuinely enjoy. And between those 6 co-op work stints, with Money Life Financial, BlackBerry, a couple of Canadian banks, an investment bank, I realized this is something that the part that I genuinely enjoy is to mine actionable intelligence, whether it's through like, structured data, through financial numbers, insights, P&Ls. And then I started feeling that all of these roles that I had in Canada, they were very good on paper. They were all with, top 100 employers, big firms. But I also started feeling like, I'm usually one out of 40,000, one out of 50,000. And then the impact that I can potentially create is very small. Regardless of how hard I work, it would take me a decade to, get to the level of influence where, I can genuinely create an impact within the organization. So that feeling combined with a couple of personal circumstances, my eldest brother got a job with Amazon, and then he was moving to like Luxembourg. So that personal consideration towards, spending some time with my family as well, those two combined, I thought, it's a great idea to go back to Pakistan. This was a time when, investments in tech space in Pakistan were on the high, and then people had coined this term called wapistanis, for people who come back. And I was seeing a lot of that, like, folks who are leaving their jobs at Microsoft, Apple, LinkedIn, and then going back, starting their own company. So it kind of motivated me a little bit. And then the idea was like, I'll work at a startup, a good one. I got an opportunity to meet Imran Ali Khan, who's the founder of Emerging Markets Property Group. He was on the lookout for somebody to handle their BI analytics. And I could see that, the last couple of rounds that they had done were all over. One was 80 million, the other one was, which happened when I joined, was around 120, and then, they achieved their unicorn status as well. So I thought, being in that space is going to be helpful. So went there, and then, worked there for quite a bit, worked with Uber. And then once I started working with Ascend, and it got set, like, I had good 26, 27 employees, and I saw the structure. That's when, I moved to Canada about two years ago. And in both these instances, Ali, like, the general reception of what I was doing was very negative. Like, all of my friends, family, everybody else thought that I was making an idiotic move. Both when I moved from Canada to Pakistan, people were like, "Who does that? Like, you have a pretty good job. You're all settled in here. You don't need to do this. Like, this doesn't make any sense." And then on the way back, they're like, people come to Pakistan to set up their own entities. Now that you have it set and you have a fairly good lifestyle here, everything is done and dusted now. Why do you want to go back to that world now? So in both those cases, yeah, wasn't something that, a lot of people backed. But those who were in my professional network, who understood the opportunity in the North American market, especially if you have a back office and you can substantiate the value you add. Um, it was just like unparalleled. We knew that, exporting was the way to go, and we also knew that, if this is something we could do with some presence there, where you sort of cater to that, trust element by being physically present, being present in the calls and in their same time zone, and then can back it up with some quality delivery from offshore. That was the model. So took the leap of faith, moved back, and then it's been great so far.
You back it up with numbers, some numbers, kind of giving us an idea, any like close times or changes in rate, something that or a number of contacts you were able to make to help us understand what that meant for the business.
Oh yeah, it's at least two significant figures, non-decimal. Like, you can add two significant figures to the average deal size. I think the billing rate, that's another thing I would very heavily credit Wixel for, is that, our billing rate to the tune of 12, $13 effective. When for the time I was in Pakistan, like, something that got us $20, $25 an hour, we used to be very happy about it. In the second year of business, not even the first one. The first year was just Pakistani contract. So second year onwards, anything around that was great. And then anything that crossed like 30, 35, 40 was a huge win. Like, that's a win where we had like 60, 70% margins, and we're actually giving bonuses out and everything else. And I remember I had this conversation with Atar Bhai, and he looks at it and he's like, "You know what? You can triple this overnight, and people will still pay for you." And I'm like, okay, that's something I'm gonna take to my heart, and I'm gonna try it. And then in one of the next conversations that we had, we actually tried doing that. Like, I was like, maybe not even tripling, but like, 2.5 times. And there was like zero pushback on that, which was a bit surprising. So we never really positioned ourselves in a way in which, like, we could ask for it was always like, we deliver quality service, but because we have offshore resources, we're competing at a very flexible rate of sorts, and like, it's something that's going to yield you a lot of cost savings, but like, we do have presence there as well. So that's one thing that transpired. And then frankly, as you build these case studies out, like, I would say the average deal size is at least 5 to 6 times bigger at the very least. And then, the the fringe ones, like, the outliers are much bigger. We didn't have an outlier like that. I know you know everything about that outlier, and we're probably going to speak a little bit about that as well. But yeah, that's about 15-20x of the average deal size.
Awesome. Awesome. That's really good to hear. Yeah, I don't exactly remember, but you made me wince on hearing $13, and I'm just like, did I? I'm sure in the when we had conversations around you and Vixel, we would have been like, oh god, what he's giving away gold for free, but.
Yeah, I think the time when I joined Wixo, the effective rate was already on the up. So like, that 13 one is the second year of business. I joined Wixo in the third year of business. So like, third year I had already moved here. I'd spent some time here. Like, we had a couple of contracts, bigger contracts going on in the US. So that had certainly improved a little bit. But even at that, the feedback I got was that, look, you're doing this for chump change. You need to This is the first thing that you need to change.
Yeah, and one thing that I would say, when you if you are actually able to deliver quality, you are better off pricing yourself higher, because that's going to get you you need that to be competitive to get the best talent. And then you're also like setting the terms of, hey, this is how we will be interacting. You will receive quality, you will, and you can if you can deliver to that, the customer is more than happy to pay. The For many customers, the reason they're having a cost conversation is because they do not trust you enough to have an outcome conversation. And people are people, whether they're if they're a talented person in the US versus a talented person in Pakistan. They're both the same thing. It's just a little bit of collaboration overhead, but it's definitely something that you can easily overcome and really deliver value to your customers.
Yeah, 100%. I think like that's also a learning curve. And then the hardest part usually is getting your foot in, right?
Mhm.
And the pitch that you have around getting your foot in, like, maybe it's for an audit, maybe it's for like a smaller chunk of the contract. That barrier of entry is something that you position your cost around, like, not the value part. If you're a nobody, you can't really say that, "Oh, we deliver quality, and like, look, we have not done anything so far, but we would still want to bill at $100 an hour."
Yeah.
That's very hard. And then that's that chicken and egg problem, where you have to start somewhere, you have to get some traction. How you get it is one part of it. And then once you do, then you start building these case studies, and you can take names and say that, this is what we have done, this is the reference if you want to reach out to them, and then command higher rates as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
100% I agree with you. Like, that's been a rather steep learning curve for me personally as well. But yeah, we're still progressing on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a ladder that needs to be climbed. Uh, so you mentioned a little bit about Vixel, kind of the part where we uh, got you to change your perspective on what it is that people are willing to pay. Well, what else can you tell us about the share about the Vixel experience?
Does this earn me any brownie points
It
going forward?
absolutely does.
Okay. Okay.
Make it very very good. Make it the best thing ever. And then this whole conversation, we're going to edit it out in the small clip in which you're saying this is the best thing ever, and people will have no idea that I totally bribed you and coaxed you into giving that.
All right, all right. Sounds like a plan. No, I think I actually got introduced to Wixel through TBS. I'm a TBS portfolio company. Actually, like that's a pretty interesting story as well. I am one of those reasons where like they substantiated that idea that we can also have this ecosystem for tech services companies as well. But yeah, like Taha introduced me. He said like these guys they're doing amazing work. You can learn a lot from them. So I signed up on the website. I got a request to meet with author. Met him the first time, and I knew the moment I met him that this is something I'm 100% interested in, because like all of these questions that he's saying are going to be a part of that boot camp. Like those are the ones that I've struggled with the most, including positioning. And then like one of the other things that we tend to do is that early on we tend to take anything that comes our way, because it's so hard for it to come your way that you don't want to say no to it. But like the smarter thing to do is that realize what is it that you do with 100% confidence, and you do better than a lot of other people that and then just positioning it around that, so that you don't say yes to everyone and make up like a sweet shop, but like you're hyper focused on that niche that you want to focus on. So I think around positioning found a lot of value, around pricing. I've referenced that earlier as well, and this then just around that journey that I need to take for getting that exit velocity, right? Like if you want to put it that way, the amount of clarity that I've received from Wixel on those steps, and then the brain trust part as well. Like I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to Preetpal. He had much of a similar journey as well, like around data and like warehousing and migration related services. But like his ability to read mind on some of those calls, and then exactly resonating with what I'm going through, because he has gone through it. And then same applies to you, Ali. Same applies to Atar Bhai as well. Vishnu to a certain extent. So like having that ability to bounce off ideas in these situations where you're thinking, am I thinking in the right direction or not? But like I want somebody to validate that for me, but not just somebody who doesn't have a clue on what I'm doing, but somebody who has actually done it and at a much bigger scale than I'm doing it right now. So I feel like all of those things combined, with the bootcamp experience, and then just for being forced to do things like defining your mission statement, defining values, things that you tend to forget about, right? Like maybe I thought about it in the first year, but like I've never really refocused on it. So those are some of the things where I feel like Wixel definitely added a lot of value. The community as well, and just being able to bounce off ideas, great value out there.
One thing I will say, I have to defend my co-founder here, Vishnu. The reason it's harder to relate to her is not because she doesn't know it. It's that she comes at it with the COO mindset and keeping us in check, and we really don't want to relate to her. But we are always served very, very well.
Oh,
Anytime we
Vishnu
listen
is
to her.
Vishnu is amazing. Vishnu is the reason, like, the first call I had with her, she was like, Sajid, this is going to be a safe space. And then you can share whatever you want that you don't like about Vixel here as well. And then, like, even the Vixel check ins that I have with her, like, they're super nice. She's super helpful. She tries to make sure that any concern that you have, whether that's a connection with somebody else, or anything else, like that gets through. I was just talking about it from more of a journey perspective, where like do I need to hire a solution architect right now? Like who do I pose this question to? That's the perspective. But yeah, not taking anything away, I have a check-in with her next week.
That makes sense, but if she's saying something on operations and finance, take her word over mine.
Yeah,
She has far better discipline than I ever exhibited in my life for any duration of time.
got
So,
it.
but yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much for going into so much detail about the value that you have received from Wixel. And I think the next thing that I actually want to talk about, and we've been hinting about it with pricing, with the bigger contract size, and I want to talk to you about that journey. And that's something a lot of tech services companies get kind of stuck in get like, okay, they have these small customers and these small clients, and you are in the constant treadmill trying to one small customer to one small customer, and they don't have the money for continuing projects. Uh, but you have a quite an interesting story there in terms of taking a client from uh, very little to actually growing them into a really big customer, and kind of using that as a platform and a jumping point.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think there are two elements to it. The first one is obviously getting your foot in, and then you need to establish the efficacy of your outreach channels. And I'm talking about all channels, right? Like, it could be inbound lead generation that you have. It could be referral network that you have, where maybe you're incentivizing people to refer or recommend some of the connections that they have. Could be anything that your sales team yields for you. But that initial acquisition of a contract value term is something that is going to be always up in the air. I don't think you're going to qualify for something big right from the word go without having any degree of trust or any degree of substance, either one of those two things, right? Like, it's either that, hey, we work for Amazon, Apple, and like, we've done this for AT&T. Like, look, that's a big enough case study for you to trust that we know what we are doing, right? Or it's either that, look, I've worked with you for 3 months now, and you know what I do and how good my team is. Like, consider the knowledge and expertise that we bring in to maybe get us in for the next phase as well. So it was a mix of both in our particular case. Like, we were able to build one case study out. Then again, like, we got a very small contract. Initially it was to design a couple of reports, just to redesign, because they were running out of time and they were on a time crunch. So we kind of solved their problem, where we came in and then just delivered by what I like to call, like, just having that flexibility of using brute force to solve that in time. Because like, if you have offshore resources, you can pair 4 or 5 of them as an investment too, just to fish for that bigger contract without having to burn a lot in dollar terms, right? So that's what we did. Like, we turned out those reports, the first set of them out, in I think 3 weeks time, which was entirely unprecedented for them. And they were like, how is this even possible? So that got us to a part where they said, look, we are going to migrate to S4 HANA. And then the entire stack that we currently have, we want that to be migrated to S4 HANA as well. So you're going to have to rebuild everything that you have done in terms of reporting, the ETL architecture. And we got really excited about that. So that was a first 6-figure deal that we cracked in here. And then,
Congratulations.
yeah. So that 6-figure deal was essentially, talking about leading away from that very small contract to an extension, then an overhaul, and then getting our foot in so that we get something for 4 months over the line. Now, after delivering that work, we had a really solid case study in the healthcare sector. It's a pretty renowned hospital, and a teaching hospital. I can't take name, but yeah, like, that's what they are. But we established that case study and the architecture work and then transformation that we had done there. We took that to get our foot in for another audit, just the audit, which was like, we require a solution architect from you. I did that personally with some help from my team. And then
Mhm.
it was a 4-week audit process, very comprehensive. And we gave that organization a 2-year roadmap, with another person who was actually consulting as a CIO for them. So it was a combined effort with them. And then essentially the way it transpired is, we did that audit. There was the first 6-month part of that transformation journey for that client, which entailed looking at everything that they'd done in their enterprise data management, all of their reports, about 200 of them on SSRS that they wanted to move to Power BI. And then the part that they trusted with us with first was just mapping everything out, and then giving them ideas of people who have worked in that organization for 10, 15, 20 years on why what we are suggesting makes a lot more sense. So just convincing them on that part after the audit was was a pretty arduous journey. And then once we got done with that, they were like, okay, you know what, this sounds amazing. First 6 months, transformative journey, we bid in 18 resources for that project. And then that's where, like, the past experience that we had, the learnings that I had from Vixel, like, just pricing it right, making sure that everything ties out, and we were able to transition from 6 figures for to 7 for the first time in our journey.
Congratulations.
So that's been the likely story of how we got there. So it wasn't like, we, even with this specific client, we didn't start with something big. It was with the audit, but even to get that audit, we had to first build out a substantiative case study in that industry that could land us there. So it's not like, you start fresh today and you're going to get an enterprise contract to start with. You'll have to build something that resonates with them, gives them that amount of trust that they require, and then also substantiates your ability to deliver enterprise solutions as well. Once you do that, don't get greedy and then try to get, like, a bigger chunk right off the bat. Start with something small, get your foot in, get a chance to prove your expertise, and then from there on you can snowball.
Okay, okay. And so the biggest, so if that's a lot of very, very useful information that you provided. And I 3 points actually stood out very strongly for me. The first one was obviously take a customer, look, it's a long-term game, build a relationship, do follow-up work, and do customer management, and build it up slowly. Don't try to go in with with the first big item when you don't have the trust and relationship. The second most significant part that I thought was also the audit part. It's we talk a lot about assessments, and that you need to have an opening offer which entices them to do more work for you. And I think that's a brilliant thing about the audit that you're doing. But and finally, the third thing that you mentioned is, hey, um, with your case studies, the more you can closely align them to what another customer would look like, that's very beneficial. And you should take that customer, uh, start start a campaign on looks like this company, and find follow-up customers, because you have already proven that you understand the industry, you solve that. And thank you so much for walking through that journey in so much detail, Sajid.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, I'll 100% second that. The audit part is actually something we realized really early on, and then this is the time where we started venturing into markets where we had zero connections, and then we were trying to win some business. In Pakistan, it was a lot easier because, like, my extended network, it was mostly like, I had to do very little structured business development effort in Pakistan because of the virtue of the network I had. Like, I would get somebody who's introducing me to somebody else, and then, like, it would materialize into a smaller contract. But yeah, outside of it, where I had no network, we had to figure out a way in which we make this lucrative, and then also reduce the barrier to entry. That's our personal journey. I 100% resonate with what you're trying to say as well. But for us, what worked out was there was a phase where we could decouple the audit from the actual milestones, and then say, look, we'll come in, we'll do an audit for you at
Mhm.
no cost if you decide to go for a milestone with us. So this was a time where, like, the audits were not that comprehensive, but the least we could do is just build a gaps in assessment report for them, and then tell them, like, look guys, this is where you're really struggling, this is what needs to be prioritized. We spoke to X amount of stakeholders, we have seen how data moves within your organization, and this is their tailored recommendation for you. If you decide to take this recommendation to someone else, just pay us a nominal fee for the audit. Otherwise, like, you have nothing to lose. And then you don't pay us anything for the audit if you do decide to go with one of the milestones. Now, the important thing here, Ali bhai, is that this is very different from going for like the body shopping route, right? Like where you're looking for roles and you're putting in resources. For some reason, we never had the inclination to do that. And then that's one other thing I would like to credit Wixel for, is that it reinforced my belief that there's a better way of doing this rather than focusing on, I need a data analyst for 6 months and then, just keep a premium on top. Take ownership for more structured delivery, and then, there are higher margins embedded in that too. So in order to get that, the assessment phase really set up a really nice segue, right? We could talk to organizations, and then the pitch usually was, we have assessed to a certain extent, we do want to do a formal audit. The least you'll get out of it at a very nominal cost, and in some cases even free, is a roadmap that tells you exactly what you need. um, it's a very hard thing to say no to, especially like, when you see that, the consultants who are coming in have good pedigree, like, they know what they're talking about. So, saying no to something like that, we don't do free audits in US anymore, between you and me, but like, we build them obviously because of the involvement, but now we have progressed to that level where we have all of those case studies to back it up, right? But yeah, that was a more sales and marketing tactic as well. How do we reduce that barrier to entry so that, people tip over the edge and say yes to it, and then we start exploring their data, and then, we know we can make it from there on.
Thank you. Actually, the reason I'm saying thank you, I don't know if you realize this. You've given me clips that I can cheat and use to advertise about five of the blog posts on the Wixel blog. So definitely something that I absolutely agree with. This is the difference. This is you're not you're not providing people anymore, you're solving a problem, and to solve the problem you have to look at the problem at the 10,000 foot view. So thank you for that reminder to everyone in that importance, and very happy to that you that we passed, and absolutely the it's a realization. This is what is very different between a body shopping company with very hard to scale margins and a premier consulting company who can command good margins because they are solving problems. They are not giving you people.
Yep, absolutely. And then there is a temptation to do body shopping. I would not lie to it. You get these requests where people are just looking for resources. We have started saying no to a lot of that because, the value we can derive out of the same resources on bigger contracts is much higher. So I would also suggest that, there is always going to be that temptation. You're always going to get those requests. Just weigh in on what the opportunity looks like for you. If it means survival, by all means go for it. But yeah, like, otherwise, if you do have that trade-off, just be patient and, have that trust in the processes that you've created, and you will see the dividends.
Absolutely, absolutely. We did do occasionally, and it's well better than the bench, right? Is kind of what my stance would be for a
Yeah.
certain time. But then obviously it doesn't go on your website or anything like that. Sajid, I'm actually you've been very very helpful. You've actually given a lot really good information for everyone that's listening. And But I have asked you for more of your time than I actually asked. So I would like to start bring the interview to a close. And I would actually ask, like, what is the future vision of your company?
Yep. That That's a good question. The vision obviously is to scale and, substantiate the value that we can create in the analytics space, as much as we can. We also want to focus in and lean in more heavily on one of the industries, and then become like a premier consulting company that does, say, for instance, analytics and healthcare side, full stack solutions, everything that we have done. It is still up to exploration, on what is that one industry that we like, triple down on. We are focusing on two at the moment. Healthcare is one of them. but yeah, like, I would want us to put, Pakistani consulting services companies on the global map as well. Make sure that, the chunk that we get out of the global, tech services consulting contracts gets bigger, and do our part in it. And then also, like, enjoy the journey as much as we can. That's the vision. I would at least want to scale it 10x from here on. That's like, one of those benchmarks that I have for myself. But yeah, there are some altruistic elements to, the vision that I have for the company, including take a lot of pride in, the grooming of resources that we have, with the exposure that they get working with the US clients. I take a lot of pride in how I see them grow. That's been one of the most rewarding elements of starting this journey. Getting somebody right from university or 1 2 years of experience, and then seeing them take command on, leading projects. Very very heartening. Very close to my heart as well. And I feel like, um, you also help the economy a lot by, the export driven model that we have, where, like, obviously, we're contributing remittances. So we're doing our part. I mean, this is what is in our hands. So from an altruistic perspective, just giving ability to resources there to get international exposure, grooming them, and then also in turn scaling it to an extent where it substantiates that yes, like, this delivery model works, and then, you're able to scale it and provide quality services. That's where I would want to take it.
So you are a Pakistani at heart and definitely
I
want to.
am very much a Wapastani at heart. Like, there is no denying that. And people that I had interacted with before coming to Canada, and, like, some of them who solely came back because, they wanted to enjoy some of that self transcendence element as well. Like, they had actualized, they knew what they wanted to do, but they wanted it to extend beyond their own self as well. I think they some of them inspired me a lot, thinking about it. And then, like, folks that left their jobs in Google came back to Pakistan, and then, like, they were trying to do something at scale. um, One of them told me that, don't let this die out in your heart. That's one thing that I consciously think about. That, yeah, I mean, like, we're doing our part. It's very little, I know, but at least, like, we're trying our best. And I think, like, if 10,000 companies like Ascend do this, we'll have most of our problems solved, if not all.
So, for the listeners, Vapas means return, and Vapastani is a portmanteau of Pakistani, and return to Pakistan,
Yes.
returner to Pakistan. So, thank you. And that part definitely, you have to have a bigger mission outside of yourself. Like, this stuff, it's hard, and it can't be just about money. It has to be a bigger thing, and absolutely agree with you in how much the impact, especially on the people whose lives are touched, is there. One last question I have for you is: what is the advice that you would give to early stage founders, or people that are, well, the advice to people who are thinking about starting? You already gave and start, but what is the advice you would give to early stage founders?
I think, to be very honest, Ali bhai, I don't feel especially qualified to dish out advice. For, like, I mean, for folks that are starting off, probably can give some advice, but, like, for people who have been doing this for longer than I have, I don't think there's a lot that I can add to their journey. I can just share what has worked out really well for us and frame that as advice. It's a very very difficult journey. It's a very lonely journey as well. Not a lot of people talk about it. I think having the community, if you can find it one way or the other, and, I swear to God, this is not like a soft segue into selling Wixel, but yeah, it goes a long way. And even before Wixel, like, I had people from TBS, that I could talk to. I think that was the biggest differentiator for me, especially at times when I felt overwhelmed, and there have been a lot of those. Things are not working out. feels like 3 months out we are going to have zero revenue, like most of the contracts are expiring. It's overwhelming. People that I had trusted with their issues and like receiving the payments, so many things, like it's just a countless volume of things that would worry you, and it probably can worry you sick as well. And I've seen founders succumbing to nervous breakdowns and that mental pressure as well, and then going in their own silos, not talking to anybody, and then not feeling like doing anything. It's all very common. I mean, like it's not something that exists in theory. It's gonna happen. It's very real. Make sure you have checks and balances in place that can help you balance that out. People that you can bounce off ideas with, people who can validate those feelings with you, and then just tell you, like how to overcome that. And it doesn't have to be a shrink. Somebody who has gone through that journey can tell you, oh yeah, it's common, like like I used to struggle with this every single day, and then this is how I started doing this. And then one of the things that has worked out for me the best is not focusing on what I don't have. Just practicing a little bit of gratitude of the journey itself, and then just doing and getting over the line with that first one task of the day. Like days that I feel overwhelmed, extremely overwhelmed or stressed, that's how I start. But yeah, the advice generally would be, make sure you have that element of community, and don't shy away from sharing things that you feel make you vulnerable. It's the ultimate strength, I would say. Like if you can open up to somebody and say that, like, look, this is what I'm struggling with, my sales are not great, I'm trying to figure this out, you've done this before. Just make sure you're open about that, and choose the right set of advisors. Make sure you have that community. It goes a long, long way. And not a plug for Wixel.
Not apply for Excel, except for when we are totally going to use it as a plug. No, thank you so much. Actually, not for the plug for Excel, that obviously, but also for bringing attention to how difficult this journey is. And I feel like a lot of my conversations with entrepreneurs start with, "It's okay. This is
Yeah.
fine. This happens."
Yes.
uh, and that you need to hear that from somebody else, and in that, yeah, this happens. And I was especially lucky in that Arthur and I, we had a decade-long friendship to build this relationship on. To build our business relationship on, and because of that, there was a lot of trust, and we had each other. A lot of
Yes.
people do it alone. You're doing it alone, and that must be significantly harder than what we went through from that perspective. So, and anyone else, like, do not ignore this part.
Yeah, 100%. It takes a toll. You have days where you're putting, especially in the early days, like, when you don't have a sizable team, you're doing a lot of this yourself. Um, there are days you're gonna put in 14, 15 hours as well. I mean, like, I would be surprised if somebody says they've never had a day like that. And then there are trade-offs, in terms of, pushback from your family as well, your friends. You can't go out enough because you're constantly trying to build this out. Personally, my family has put like a cross on me. They know that regardless of what event it is, he's going to prioritize work first. But yeah, like those are trade-offs, and then it's okay to talk about those. And 9 times out of 10, the other person is going to share that they had something very similar, which is very comforting. And then
Yeah.
also, like on the tactical side of things, strategic side of things, just validating those ideas and then getting over that fear of whether this would work out or not. Making an informed decision, even if it does not work out, counts for learning. Making an uninformed decision where you just were too scared to reach out, that's on you, I would say. Like you had the option of, like reaching out and then making a more informed one. So just make sure, like you have exhausted those options, and then reach out to the community. Make sure you have a community. Make sure you have people that you can rely on. Otherwise, it's a very, very difficult journey to do alone. Not impossible, but just takes a toll on you.
Absolutely. And that toll affects the outcomes. And so you have to be sure to address it. And really appreciate you making that call out. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day, having such a detailed conversation with us, and giving so many valuable pieces of advice and nuggets of knowledge to for people, and also for the multiple plugs of Wixel, whether you wanted to insert them or not. I will exploit those without any regret.
For
Thank you so much
sure.
for your
No
time,
problem.
Sajid.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ali. Have a good one.